Chapter 1. The Illusion of a Happy Family. Diana Miller sat in the living room, her gaze drifting lazily over the photos lining the walls. The family pictures, perfectly arranged, depicted a picture-perfect life. Her smiling parents on vacation in the Bahamas, their arms around each other as if they were the epitome of happiness. Diana knew better, though. She had grown up with these images, but they no longer held the same meaning. Beneath the facade of these staged moments was a truth she could no longer ignore. Her father, Charles, sat across from her, reading the newspaper, his eyes scanning the pages with a detached expression. He hadn't spoken a word since dinner, and the silence between them had grown so thick that it felt suffocating. Diana could almost hear the unspoken words between him and her mother, Rebecca, who was in the kitchen preparing a pot of tea. Her movements stiff and deliberate. It was a routine Diana had become all too familiar with over the years. Her parents no longer spoke to each other unless absolutely necessary. Their conversations had turned into cold, transactional exchanges. The only time she saw them interact with any semblance of warmth was when they pretended to be the perfect couple for her sake. For the sake of maintaining the illusion of a happy family. But Diana wasn't a child anymore. She could see through the act. As a little girl, Diana had believed that love was supposed to be like what she saw in movies, carefree, full of passion and joy. She'd once imagined her parents were just like the couples in the films she adored, where the hero always came home to a warm embrace, where laughter echoed in the house, and where everything was always right in the world. But the truth was far from that. Diana's childhood was filled with silence and distance. Her mother would spend hours alone in her room, staring at nothing in particular, while her father buried himself in work, often coming home late, leaving Diana to wonder if he even remembered she existed. And when they did speak, it was always about mundane matters, finances, bills, the state of the house. Their love had long since disappeared, leaving behind two people who were simply coexisting. It wasn't that Diana had never tried to intervene. As a teenager, she'd often asked her mother why she stayed in the marriage, why she put up with the cold treatment from her father. But Rebecca had always brushed her questions aside, telling Diana to focus on her studies and not to worry about things that weren't her concern. Diana didn't understand then, but she did now. Her mother had grown accustomed to the emptiness of their marriage, perhaps too scared to face the reality of what would happen if they separated. As Diana got older, she began to see her parents' lack of affection as a source of quiet pain, not just for her, but for them too. She knew they were trapped in a life they hadn't chosen. But what could they do? They had built this life together, and there was no turning back now. Or so it seemed. On her 25th birthday, Diana found herself sitting at the dinner table once again. The same awkward silence hanging in the air. The birthday cake adorned with candles sat untouched on the table as her parents exchanged the same forced smiles they always did for occasions like this. Diana glanced at them, her father's face, tight and strained, his lips pressed into a thin line, and her mother, her eyes downcast, avoiding the smallest hint of eye contact. She could no longer bear it. Mom, Dad, Diana's voice was steady but firm. A stark contrast to the trembling in her heart. I've been thinking a lot lately, and I think it's time you two face the truth. Both her parents stopped what they were doing, their eyes finally meeting hers with shock and confusion. I don't want to live in this lie anymore, Diana continued, her voice gaining strength. I don't want to celebrate birthdays in this house where everything feels fake. I don't want to keep pretending that everything is okay when I know it's not. I know you two haven't been happy for years, and I don't expect you to stay together for my sake. I don't need that. Charles and Rebecca stared at her, frozen. Diana's words hung in the air like a heavy weight. For years, they had built their lives around the idea that they needed to protect Diana from the reality of their crumbling marriage. But in that moment, Diana had turned the tables. It was as though she had taken the mask they'd worn for so long and ripped it off, exposing them to the truth they had been avoiding. "I want you both to be free," Diana said softly, her voice breaking slightly as she fought back the tears that threatened to spill. "I want you to live your own lives, to find happiness. I don't want to carry this burden anymore. I don't need a fake family." Her words lingered in the room, heavy with emotion. Charles opened his mouth as if to say something, but no sound came out. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in years, Diana saw the pain that her mother had been hiding all this time. It was the first time they had been forced to confront the truth about their marriage, about their lives. And in that moment, Diana knew that everything was about to change. The dinner was over soon after that, but the atmosphere in the house had shifted. Diana had spoken her truth, and now it was time for her parents to make their own decisions. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a long journey toward healing for all of them. The end of their marriage was not the end of their family, but the beginning of a new chapter, one where each of them could finally live authentically. Chapter 2. The beginning of freedom. The days following Diana's confrontation with her parents were a blur. There was no immediate resolution, no instant change. But the air in the house felt different, lighter somehow. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted, though no one knew exactly how to proceed. The silence that had once been so suffocating now seemed to carry with it a new sense of possibility. Diana didn't expect them to decide everything right away. After all, they had lived this way for so long, each of them going through the motions of their existence. But she had spoken her truth, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe freely again. The following Sunday, her mother, Rebecca, sat down with her for the first time since the birthday dinner. They were in the kitchen, Diana sitting at the small table where she used to do her homework as a child, now filled with papers and magazines. Rebecca poured 2 cups of tea, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were gathering the courage to speak. "You were right, Diana," her mother said quietly, sitting across from her. "We've been living a lie for so long. I thought I could keep this family together for your sake. I thought it was better to stay in a loveless marriage than to risk you being hurt." Diana could hear the guilt in her mother's voice. She hadn't realized just how much her mother had been carrying, how much pain she had kept hidden for years. Diana reached across the table, placing her hand over her mother's. "I understand, Mom," Diana said gently, "but it's not just about me anymore. I've grown up. I can handle the truth, even if it's painful." Rebecca looked at her daughter, tears welling up in her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel the weight of her choices. "I was afraid that without your father, I'd be alone. But now, I don't know, maybe I've been lonely all along." Diana squeezed her mother's hand. "You won't be alone, Mom. You've always been strong, and you deserve to be happy. We all do." The conversation was short but meaningful. Diana could sense that her mother was still in shock, still processing the enormity of what was happening. But it was a start, the beginning of something new. That evening, Diana returned to her apartment, a small 1-bedroom in the city she had recently moved into. It was modest, but it was hers. For the first time in her life, she felt completely independent, free from the shadows of her parents' troubled marriage. The quiet of her apartment felt comforting, almost healing. But as she sat down on her couch, her phone buzzed with a message from her father. "Charles Miller, can we talk tomorrow?" Diana hesitated for a moment, but then typed her response. "Diana Miller, sure. I'll be at my place after work." The next day, Diana found herself standing in the familiar living room of her childhood home. It had always been a place of mixed emotions for her, filled with memories, both good and bad. She didn't know what to expect from this conversation with her father, but she was prepared for honesty, no matter how hard it might be. When Charles opened the door, his face was unreadable, but there was something different in his eyes. Maybe it was the understanding that things were changing, that their family was changing. He led her to the living room, where they both sat in the same spots they always did. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was as though both were waiting for the other to say something first, to break the silence that had settled between them. Finally, Charles spoke, his voice low. "You were right, Diana. I've been avoiding this for too long. I thought if I kept pretending, everything would stay the same. I thought I could make it work." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "But I haven't been fair to you. Or to your mother. We haven't been fair to anyone." Diana looked at her father, her heart aching. She had always wanted to believe he was capable of more than what he had shown her over the years. But now, seeing him so vulnerable, she realized he was just as lost as her mother had been. "I don't expect you to get back together with Mom," Diana said, her voice soft but steady. "But you both need to figure out who you are, apart from each other. You've both been living in the past for so long that it's held you back from moving forward." Charles nodded, his expression weary. "I know. I've been holding on to this idea of what family is supposed to look like, but I think it's time for us all to move on. I want you to be happy, Diana. I've failed at that. But I don't want to fail you anymore." The weight of his words hit her hard. Diana had spent so many years feeling abandoned, neglected, and confused by her father's silence, but now she saw a man who was finally admitting his mistakes. For the first time in her life, Diana felt as though she was speaking to the real Charles Miller, the father she had always hoped for. "I'm not angry, Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I just want us all to be free. Free from the past. Free from pretending." Charles reached out, taking her hand in his. "I'll do better, Diana. I'll figure it out. And I'll be there for you, whenever you need me." Diana smiled, a sense of peace washing over her. She knew that things wouldn't be perfect, but this conversation had been a step toward healing, and that was all she could ask for. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes. Diana continued to live her independent life, but her relationship with her parents was evolving. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt hopeful about the future. Her parents, too, began to find their own paths. Charles started seeing a therapist to work through his emotions, and Rebecca began taking pottery classes, something she had always wanted to do, but had never allowed herself to explore. And through it all, Diana found herself surrounded by love, not from the perfect family she had once dreamed of, but from two people who were finally learning to be true to themselves and, in turn, to her. Chapter 3. The Road to Healing. Weeks passed, and the initial shock of her parents' decision to divorce began to settle into a new, quieter routine. Diana's apartment, once a place of solitude, became a sanctuary for her as she navigated the aftermath of their decisions. She had always prided herself on being independent, but now, more than ever, she realized just how much she had been tied to the notion of family and the expectations that came with it. Diana still remembered the day she had returned to her parents' house and sat across from them, her mother tearful and her father quietly acknowledging the truth. Since that day, her mother had been distant, but there were moments, small, tender moments, when Diana saw a flicker of the woman her mother once was, before she had become so bound to the idea of holding up a false front. Charles, too, was changing. Diana could feel the weight lifting from his shoulders. Though their conversations were still often terse and awkward, there was a genuine effort from both sides to find common ground. They weren't the same family anymore, but they were beginning to find a new rhythm, one that no longer relied on lies or the suffocating pressure of pretending. One particular evening, Diana was sitting at the kitchen table in her apartment, scrolling through a work email, when her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother, Rebecca Miller. "I signed up for a pottery class next week. I'm nervous, but I think I'll enjoy it. I'm finally doing something for myself." Diana smiled to herself as she read the message. Her mother had been so afraid of living for herself, of pursuing her own happiness. But now she was slowly taking the steps to break free from her years of repression. She quickly typed back, her fingers moving with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "Diana Miller, that's amazing, Mom. I'm so proud of you. I know you're going to love it. I'm excited to hear all about it." Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her father. "Charles Miller, I've been seeing a therapist, Diana. It's hard, but I think it's helping. I'm trying to be a better man. Not just for you, but for myself." Diana's heart tightened at his words. For so long, she had yearned for her father to open up, to admit his mistakes, to show vulnerability. Now, he was doing just that. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And for Diana, it was enough. "Diana Miller, I'm proud of you, Dad. I know it's not easy, but you're doing the right thing. Just take it one step at a time." After sending the message, Diana sat back in her chair, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She had spent so many years trying to fix her family, trying to make everything okay. But now she realized that the only person she had control over was herself. Her parents had to find their own path to healing, just as she had. A few days later, Diana attended a family gathering at her mother's house. It was one of those rare occasions when they all came together, not as a family unit, but as separate individuals with their own lives. Charles came by first, bringing a bottle of wine as a gesture of goodwill. Rebecca had invited him, and Diana had agreed to come. Knowing that this was their first real attempt at rebuilding some semblance of connection. As Diana arrived, she noticed her mother had set the table in the living room with candles and fresh flowers, trying to create a warm, inviting atmosphere. The air between them felt lighter, more relaxed than it had in years. No one was pretending. No one was trying to force an image of a happy family. They were simply three people, trying to make the best of a difficult situation. Her mother greeted her with a smile, and Diana could see the quiet joy in her eyes. A joy that had been missing for so long. "It feels good to have you here," Rebecca said softly as Diana embraced her. "I'm glad to be here, Mom," Diana replied, her voice filled with sincerity. Charles, who had been standing by the window, turned when he heard them. His expression was still reserved, but there was a softness to it, an openness that Diana hadn't seen in years. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice gentle. "Have you been?" "I'm good, Dad," Diana replied, her smile genuine. "How about you?" "Getting there," Charles answered. "One day at a time." They sat down together at the table, their conversation flowing more easily than Diana had anticipated. They talked about work, about her mother's pottery class, and even about some of the things they had all been avoiding for years. There were no grand apologies, no heavy confessions. But there was something more valuable, a sense of respect, of understanding, and, most importantly, of acceptance. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, moments when the weight of their past hung in the air like a ghost. But they were learning to live with it, to move forward without pretending everything was fine. And that, Diana realized, was enough. As the evening wore on, Diana found herself laughing with her parents, the sound of it filling the space between them. It felt foreign, but not unpleasant. For the first time in a long time, she felt like they were all truly living in the present, not stuck in the past. When the night came to a close, Charles stood up to leave, and Diana felt a surprising sense of relief. She could see that he was still on his own journey, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to fix him. "Take care of yourself, Dad," she said as she hugged him. "And keep doing the work." "I will, Diana," he replied, his voice steady. "I promise." After he left, Diana stayed a little longer with her mother, helping her clean up. as they stood side by side at the sink. Her mother looked at her, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you for everything, Diana," Rebecca said softly. "For helping me see that it's okay to live for myself. For helping us both." Diana smiled, her heart swelling with love for her mother. "You don't have to thank me, Mom. You've always had the strength inside you. You just needed to see it for yourself." As the night drew to a close, Diana stood in the doorway of her mother's house, watching her father's car drive away into the night. She knew that their journey was far from over, but she also knew that they were all heading in the right direction. The healing had begun. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. Chapter 4: New Beginnings. Weeks turned into months, and as the seasons shifted, so did Diana's relationship with her parents. The awkwardness that had once defined their interactions gradually faded, replaced by a genuine effort to understand each other. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time, Diana felt that there was no pretending, no false hope. It was raw, real, and healing. Diana's life, too, had begun to flourish in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had thrown herself into her work at the communications firm, earning a well-deserved promotion. Her apartment felt more like a home now, a sanctuary where she could escape from the noise of the world. Even in the stillness of the evenings, she no longer felt the weight of her past dragging her down. One late afternoon, as Diana sat at her desk organizing her thoughts for a presentation, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother. "Rebecca Miller, I'm thinking of going on a trip next month. Maybe a weekend getaway to the coast. It's been a while since I've done something just for myself." Diana's heart swelled. Her mother was finally embracing the idea of self-care, of taking time for herself without feeling guilty. It was a huge shift from the woman who had once sacrificed her happiness for the sake of her family. "Diana Miller, that sounds like a great idea. Mom, you deserve it. I hope you find the peace and joy you're looking for." The message from her mother filled Diana with a sense of pride. She had spent years watching her parents navigate their strained marriage, unable to break free from the cycle of guilt and obligation. But now, both of them were learning to live for themselves, to find happiness outside the expectations they had long carried. Diana knew that she had played a part in the shift, but more importantly, she knew that her parents had taken the initiative to change. They were no longer tied to their past, no longer bound by the need to maintain a facade. They were becoming the people they had always been meant to be, and for that, Diana was grateful. One evening, Diana was walking home from work, the sun setting behind the skyline of Los Angeles. The city was alive with energy, but there was a calmness in Diana's steps as she reflected on the journey she had been on. She had finally made peace with her past, and though the healing process was ongoing, she felt lighter, freer than she had ever felt before. It wasn't about forgetting the pain, but about learning to live with it, to let go of the toxic expectations that had once ruled her life. As she approached her apartment building, she saw her phone light up with a message from her father. "Charles Miller, I've been thinking about what you said, about living for myself. I've realized I've been stuck in the same place for too long. I'm taking some time off work next week to travel. I think it's time I do something for myself." Diana smiled at the message. She had always known that her father had the capacity to change, but seeing him take action, truly taking the time to focus on his own needs, was a huge step. She quickly typed back, "Diana Miller, I'm proud of you, Dad. I know it's not easy, but you're doing great. I'm happy for you." The next morning, Diana met her father for coffee at a small cafe near her apartment. As they sat together, there was an ease in the air between them that hadn't been there before. It was as though the weight of years of unspoken words and unresolved tension had finally been lifted. "I'm glad we're doing this," Charles said as he stirred his coffee, his voice low but genuine. "I know I wasn't the father you needed, and for that, I'm sorry. But I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm doing the work, Diana. And I'm learning to be honest with myself. About everything. Diana smiled softly. I know, Dad. And I appreciate it. I've seen the change in you. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real. Charles nodded, his eyes filled with sincerity. I'm not perfect, but I want to be someone you can count on. No more pretending. Diana's heart swelled with emotion. For so many years, she had longed for this moment, for her father to open up, to acknowledge the pain of their past. And now here he was, doing just that. The healing wasn't just for her, it was for him too. I'm proud of you, Dad, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. That's all I ever wanted. A few weeks later, Diana found herself standing in the backyard of her childhood home, watching as her mother arranged flowers in a vase. Charles had left for his trip, and it was just the two of them, standing together in the quiet of the evening. For a moment, Diana observed her mother, who seemed more at ease than she had in years. She was no longer the woman who had lived in the shadow of a marriage that had drained her spirit. She was, for the first time, living for herself, and it was a beautiful thing to witness. Diana walked over to her mother, who smiled up at her. What's on your mind, sweetheart? I'm proud of you, Mom. Diana said softly, her voice full of warmth. You've come so far. I never imagined you'd be doing this for yourself. It's inspiring. Rebecca smiled, her eyes soft with gratitude. Thank you, Diana. I never thought I'd be able to live for myself, but here I am. And it feels good. I'm happy for you, Mom, Diana said, her heart full. You deserve this. You deserve happiness, peace, and everything you've ever dreamed of. Rebecca reached out and took her daughter's hand. And so do you, sweetheart. So do you. The evening wore on, and Diana found herself sitting with her mother, both of them enjoying the calm that had settled between them. The healing was far from over, but Diana knew that they were on the right path. Together, they were learning how to embrace their new lives, not as the family they once were, but as the individuals they were meant to be. And in that moment, Diana realized that healing didn't mean going back to what was broken. It meant moving forward, embracing change, and learning to love in a way that was real, raw, and true. The past was no longer a burden. It was simply a part of the story that had led them to this moment, to this new beginning. And Diana was ready to embrace it. Chapter 5. The Strength in Change. The warmth of the morning sun streamed through the window, casting a golden glow over Diana's living room. She sat on her couch, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, reflecting on the last few months. It had been a season of growth and healing, not just for her, but for her parents too. The long, painful journey they had all been on was starting to show signs of real transformation. But there were still moments when Diana felt the weight of her choices, when the remnants of her old life crept in old patterns, old fears, and the lingering ache of the past. Her phone buzzed, breaking her from her thoughts. It was a message from her mother. Rebecca Miller, I've been thinking. I'm going to visit a few old friends next month. It's time I reconnect with people from the past. I want to do things that make me feel alive again. Diana's heart swelled with happiness as she read the message. Her mother was finally embracing all the things she had set aside for years, the friendships, the activities, and the passions that had been buried under the weight of a broken marriage. Diana quickly replied, Diana Miller, that sounds amazing, Mom. You deserve to live your life fully. I'm so proud of you. She put her phone down and took a deep breath. It felt like everything was falling into place, one piece at a time. Her own life was taking on a rhythm she had long desired, free from the chaos and the heavy emotions that had once defined her family dynamic. She had built a life of independence, but more importantly, a life rooted in authenticity. Though the healing had been slow, Diana felt a deep sense of peace. She could finally look back at her past without feeling anger or resentment. It was a part of her, but it no longer controlled her. Diana had reclaimed her own narrative, and with that came a sense of freedom she had never known before. A few days later, Diana and her father had made plans to meet at their favorite cafe. Charles had returned from his trip, and though he was quieter than his usual self, there was an air of contentment about him. He had spent his time reflecting, and it showed. Diana had always admired his intellect, but now she admired his ability to confront his own shortcomings and make a genuine effort to change. As Diana arrived, she found her father sitting at their usual table near the window, sipping his coffee. When he saw her, he smiled, his face more relaxed than it had been in years. "Hey, kiddo," he greeted, his voice warm. "How have you been?" "I've been good," Diana replied, her eyes softening as she sat down across from him. "How about you? How was the trip?" "It was eye-opening," Charles admitted. "I did a lot of thinking. A lot of things came to light. I think I'm finally starting to understand what I've been missing." Diana nodded, her gaze steady. She knew what he meant. He had spent so many years focusing on the wrong things: success, appearances, and maintaining a false sense of family. Now he was learning that happiness didn't come from those things, but from living honestly, from making choices that were aligned with one's true self. "I'm glad you took that time for yourself, Dad," Diana said. "It sounds like it was exactly what you needed." Charles smiled faintly. "It was. And I've been thinking a lot about what you said when we talked about your mom and me. You were right, Diana. We've both been living in the past, holding on to things that no longer serve us." Diana reached across the table and placed her hand on his. "I'm glad to hear that, Dad. I know it's hard, but you're doing the right thing. I can see the difference." "I'm trying, kid," Charles said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm no longer trying to control it. I'm letting go of things. I'm learning to be vulnerable, and that's not easy for me." Diana's heart swelled with pride. Her father, the man who had always seemed so distant and controlled, was finally becoming the person he was always meant to be. It was a long road, but he was taking those crucial steps toward healing. "You're doing great, Dad," Diana said softly. "I'm really proud of you." They sat in silence for a moment, simply enjoying each other's company. Diana realized that, for the first time, she was seeing her father not just as a parent, but as a person who was flawed, just like everyone else, but who was willing to change. And in that moment, she felt a deep connection with him that she hadn't felt in years. As the months passed, Diana's relationship with her parents continued to evolve. There were still moments of discomfort, but they were no longer paralyzed by fear or resentment. They were learning to accept each other, not as the people they had once been, but as who they were now, imperfect, but real. One Saturday afternoon, Diana sat at the kitchen table in her mother's house, watching as Rebecca arranged a vase of fresh daisies. They had just returned from a weekend trip together, and Diana could see the glow of contentment in her mother's face. It was the first time in a long while that Rebecca had allowed herself to be truly present in the moment. "I think I'm starting to get it, Diana," her mother said, her voice soft. "I've spent so many years trying to hold everything together, thinking that was the right thing to do. But now, I see that it's okay to let go. It's okay to be free." Diana smiled, her heart full. "I'm glad you're finding that peace, Mom. You deserve it more than anyone I know." Rebecca placed the vase on the table and looked at her daughter, her eyes shining with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you, Diana. You gave me the strength to change. You gave me the courage to live for myself." Diana's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. She had watched her mother go from a woman who had been trapped in her own fears to someone who was finally living for herself. And in doing so, her mother had given Diana the greatest gift of all, the courage to live authentically. As they sat together in silence, Diana knew that their journey was far from over. There would be bumps along the way, moments when the past would resurface, but they would face them together. And in that shared strength, Diana found something she had never thought possible: peace. She looked out the window at the world beyond. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Diana wasn't afraid. She had built her life, piece by piece, from the lessons of the past. And now she was ready to embrace whatever came next. And as she sat there, in the quiet comfort of her mother's home, Diana realized that healing didn't always come in grand moments or dramatic revelations. Sometimes it came in the stillness, in the small, everyday acts of living a life that was true and real. For Diana, that was enough. And it always would be. Chapter 6: The Light of Acceptance. The months passed with a peaceful rhythm that Diana had longed for but never fully believed could exist. Her life, though still evolving, felt grounded in the authenticity she had fought for so long to find. Her work was fulfilling, her friendships blossoming, and her relationship with her parents, though still delicate, was growing in new and unexpected ways. They were learning together how to be honest, how to forgive, and, most importantly, how to truly live. One late afternoon, Diana found herself sitting on her balcony, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the distance as the sun set. She was alone, but it wasn't the kind of loneliness she had once feared. It was the kind that came with solitude, a peaceful, content solitude. She was finally comfortable with herself, with the life she had built. Her phone buzzed on the table next to her, and she reached for it, reading the message that had just come through. It was from her mother. "Rebecca Miller, I've decided to move into a smaller place. Something more manageable. It's time for a change, and I think it'll help me focus on myself more. What do you think?" Diana's heart warmed as she read the message. Her mother was taking yet another step toward embracing her own independence, her own life. The woman who had once been so afraid to make decisions for herself was now making bold choices. And Diana couldn't be prouder. "Diana Miller, I think that's a great idea, Mom. It sounds like exactly what you need. I'm excited for you." She set the phone down and took a deep breath. It was hard to believe how far they had come in such a short time. Her parents were no longer the people they had been, the ones who had lived in a world of pretense and unspoken pain. They were becoming who they had always been meant to be, and Diana could only hope that her own journey would continue to unfold with this same sense of purpose and clarity. The next weekend, Diana found herself walking through the streets of the city with her father. They had agreed to spend the day together, something they hadn't done in years. It was strange at first. The way they moved through the world together without the shadow of her parents' broken marriage hanging over them. But it also felt liberating. They weren't bound by the past anymore. They were two individuals, each with their own story, their own journey. As they strolled through the park, Charles stopped and turned to Diana, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice tinged with quiet emotion, "about how much I've missed. How much time I've wasted not being present. Not just with your mother, but with you too." Diana smiled softly, her heart swelling. "Dad, I know it wasn't easy. But the fact that you're here now, that you're trying, that means more than you know." Charles nodded, his eyes a little misty. "I'm not perfect, Diana. I never was. But I'm learning, and I want you to know that I'm here now. I'm really here." Diana reached out, placing her hand on his. "You don't have to be perfect, Dad. You just have to be you. That's enough." They stood there for a moment, both of them lost in the simplicity of the moment. It was a far cry from the tense, fractured family they had once been. And Diana couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. The healing wasn't just something she had been doing on her own, it had become a shared experience. One that they were all navigating together at their own pace. The following months brought more changes, small but significant. Rebecca moved into her new apartment, a cozy one-bedroom that reflected her newfound independence. She filled it with the things she loved: bright flowers, old books, paintings from her travels, and for the first time, Diana could see the woman she had always known was inside her mother, a woman who was finally taking ownership of her life. Charles, too, had continued his therapy and began spending more time doing the things he enjoyed: reading, hiking, and even starting to take an interest in painting, something he had always wanted to try but had never allowed himself the time for. His transformation was slow but steady, and Diana could see the change in him every time they spoke. And as for Diana, she continued to embrace the freedom she had fought so hard for. Her relationships were growing deeper, more meaningful, and her own journey of healing was far from over. But she was no longer afraid of what that journey might bring. One evening, Diana found herself sitting across from her parents once again, this time at a small family gathering. The tension that had once defined these gatherings had melted away. There was laughter, there was joy, and for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of peace. Her parents no longer looked like the people they had been trapped in their old roles, but like the people they were becoming. They were learning, just as Diana was. That family wasn't about perfection. It was about love, understanding, and the willingness to grow together. As Diana looked at them, her heart swelled with gratitude. The past had shaped them, but it no longer defined them. They were free now, free to be themselves, free to embrace the life they had been given. And Diana, too, was free. Free to live her life on her own terms. Free to embrace the future with open arms. The healing had come in stages, sometimes painfully slow, but now it felt whole. It wasn't about forgetting the past or erasing the hurt. It was about accepting it and choosing to move forward together in a way that was authentic and real. As the night came to a close, Diana stood up, feeling a deep sense of contentment in her heart. She had found her peace, and for the first time, she was truly at home, within herself, within her family, and in the life she had built. The journey was far from over, but it had brought her to a place of understanding, of acceptance. And that was enough. For now, it was enough. Chapter 7. Embracing the future. The following year brought with it new opportunities and even greater clarity. Diana had grown accustomed to the life she had built, but the more she looked at herself, her parents, and the world around her, the more she realized how far they had all come. The healing that had once felt like an uphill battle was now a gentle current, one that flowed naturally through their lives, carrying them forward with quiet strength. Diana found herself more open to the possibilities ahead of her, unburdened by the heavy expectations that had once defined her sense of self. The pressure to fulfill any preconceived idea of what she should be had dissipated, leaving room for a deeper connection with herself and the people she loved. One Saturday afternoon, Diana decided to visit her mother in her new apartment. It had been several months since Rebecca moved in, and Diana was always amazed at how much the space seemed to reflect her mother's evolving spirit. The apartment was modest, but full of life. Colorful rugs, antique furniture, and shelves filled with books and travel souvenirs, a clear reflection of her mother's journey to reclaim herself. As Diana stepped inside, she was greeted by the soft scent of lavender, her mother's favorite. Rebecca was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea and reading a book. "Hey, Mom," Diana said with a smile, walking over to kiss her mother on the cheek. "Hi, sweetheart. You're just in time for tea," Rebecca replied, her face softening with a smile that spoke volumes about how far she had come. Diana sat down across from her mother, taking a deep breath as she surveyed the room. The space felt different, more alive, more vibrant than the house they had lived in before. It was clear that this was her mother's space, not defined by obligation, but by choice. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Rebecca said, setting her tea down. About living for myself. I think I finally get it. The whole idea of self-care and putting myself first. I spent so many years thinking I couldn't do that I had to give everything to others first. But now, I'm starting to realize it's okay to take up space, to be my own person. Diana's heart swelled with pride. You've always been capable of this, Mom. You just needed to give yourself permission to embrace it. I'm really proud of you. Rebecca looked at her daughter with eyes filled with gratitude and warmth. You've been such a big part of that. Diana, I never would have made these changes without you showing me that it was okay to let go of the past and live for myself. You've taught me so much about resilience and strength. Diana smiled softly, her eyes glistening with emotion. I didn't do it alone, Mom. We both found our way, together. Weeks later, Diana found herself at a crossroads in her professional life. She had been offered a new job in a different city, an exciting opportunity that would challenge her and allow her to grow in ways she hadn't imagined. It was everything she had worked for. But the decision wasn't an easy one. The idea of leaving behind the city she had called home and the life she had created here was a daunting thought. But she had learned over the last year that change, though uncomfortable, was often necessary for growth. Diana sat on her balcony, staring out at the skyline as she thought about the job offer. She had always been the type to lean toward stability, but now, with her parents' encouragement and her own newfound courage, she realized that it was time to embrace change. The future was wide open, and she didn't have to stay rooted in one place for fear of losing everything she had worked for. Her phone buzzed, breaking her from her thoughts. It was a text from her father, Charles Miller. I heard about the job offer. I think it's a great opportunity for you. You deserve to follow your passion, Diana. Don't hold back. Diana smiled, feeling the warmth of her father's support. It had been a long time since he had expressed such clear and heartfelt encouragement. His words meant more than she could say. She quickly typed a response. Diana Miller, thanks, Dad. I'm still thinking about it, but it's comforting to know you believe in me. I think I'm ready for this next step. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she added one more line. Diana Miller, you've come so far, Dad. I'm proud of you. She hit send and leaned back in her chair, allowing the peace of the moment to wash over her. Diana had made so many decisions for everyone else over the years, what was best for her mother, for her father, for the family. But now, for the first time, she was making a decision for herself. It was empowering and terrifying all at once, but it was hers to make. As the days passed, Diana's decision became clearer. She had spent so much of her life tethered to the expectations of others. But now she was free. Free to build the life she truly wanted. It wasn't about running away from the past. It was about stepping forward into a future that held promise and excitement. The day Diana handed in her resignation letter at work was bittersweet. She had made so many memories at the company, learned so much, and forged lasting friendships. But she knew that her journey was leading her somewhere else now. Her eyes shone with excitement as she prepared for the move. Her heart filled with both anticipation and gratitude for everything she had left behind. On her last evening in the city, Diana sat with her parents in the small, cozy restaurant they had frequented for years. It was a bittersweet farewell, but there was no sadness in the air, only a sense of gratitude for how far they had all come. As they clinked glasses, Diana looked at her parents, her heart full. I'm really going to miss this, she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. Rebecca reached across the table and squeezed her hand. We're proud of you, Diana. You've always been brave. This is just the next chapter, and we'll be cheering you on every step of the way. Charles nodded, his expression a mixture of pride and affection. Go follow your dreams, Diana. You've earned this. Tears pricked at Diana's eyes, but they were happy tears. The years of tension, the hurt, the silence, They had all given way to something more beautiful: understanding, forgiveness, and unconditional love. Her family might not be perfect, but they were her family. And they were stronger because they had healed together. As she stood to leave, ready to take that next step, Diana knew that she was no longer bound by the past. She was free, ready to embrace the future with open arms. And for the first time in a long time, Diana felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The future was uncertain, but Diana was no longer afraid. She had learned that healing wasn't just about fixing what was broken, it was about embracing the journey, letting go of the things that weighed her down, and making space for something better. Her journey was just beginning. And with each step forward, Diana knew she would find her way toward a life that was hers to create, full of endless possibilities. Chapter 8. The New Dawn. The first few weeks in her new city were a whirlwind of adjustment. Diana had always considered herself adaptable, but the shift in lifestyle, the unfamiliar streets, and the constant hum of a place that never seemed to stop had a way of both exciting and overwhelming her. She had arrived with a heart full of dreams, but also with a quiet understanding that this was not just a physical relocation. It was a recalibration of her life, her identity, and everything she had learned up until that point. As she unpacked the final box in her new apartment, a bright, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a sprawling cityscape, Diana felt a rush of anticipation. The move had been planned for months, but now that she was here, it felt like she was on the cusp of something monumental. She glanced out the window, watching the city bustle below, and then texted her parents. "Diana Miller, I made it. The view is incredible. This city is everything I imagined and more." Her phone buzzed a moment later. "Rebecca Miller, I'm so proud of you. I can already see that you're going to thrive there. Keep pushing forward, and don't forget to take time for yourself. You deserve it. Charles Miller, you've got this, Diana. We'll miss you. But I know you're on the path that's meant for you. Make the most of this new adventure." Diana smiled as she read their messages. It was strange to think that not long ago, she had been at a crossroads with her family, unsure of where things were going. Yet now they were stronger than ever, each of them navigating their own journey of self-discovery and healing. She realized how far they had come, how much they had grown. They weren't perfect, but they had created something beautiful and lasting. Diana paused for a moment, reflecting on her own transformation. She had never imagined leaving behind the life she had built, the friends she had made, the comfort of the familiar. But she had also never imagined the kind of freedom and potential that awaited her here. This city, this life, was her next chapter, one where she could write her own story, unburdened by the constraints of the past. The following month, Diana threw herself into her new job, finding herself in a position that required her to travel frequently, meet new people, and adapt to an ever-changing environment. It was a role that both challenged and exhilarated her, pushing her to think outside the box, to stay on her toes, and to constantly evolve. It was exactly the kind of work she had hoped for when she made the decision to move: dynamic, fast-paced, and filled with endless opportunities. Despite the excitement of her career, Diana found herself balancing work with a newfound sense of introspection. The freedom she had craved for so long had given her room to breathe, but it also gave her time to reflect on what truly mattered in her life. She spent weekends exploring the city, meeting new people, and connecting with colleagues who shared her passions and values. But more often than not, she spent time alone, reflecting on her journey and appreciating how far she had come. It was during one of these quiet weekends, as she walked through a park near her apartment, that she had a realization. She was no longer the person she had once been, the girl trapped in a family's expectations, bound by the weight of other people's dreams. She was her own person now, unapologetically living her truth, carving her own path forward. She had taken risks, faced uncertainty, and allowed herself to grow into the woman she had always wanted to become. As she sat on a bench, watching people pass by, Diana felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She was at home in her own skin now, a far cry from the uncertainty and fear that had once plagued her. The healing journey wasn't over, it would never be. But she had found something she hadn't known she was searching for: acceptance. She had accepted herself, her family, and her past. She no longer carried the weight of regret or resentment. The future, though uncertain, was filled with endless possibilities. As the year passed, Diana's life continued to unfold in beautiful, unexpected ways. She became more involved in her work, eventually leading a team that was both creative and driven, bringing fresh ideas to life. She formed close friendships with people who shared her vision and values, and her weekends were filled with art exhibitions, music festivals, and quiet moments in nature. But despite all the success and fulfillment in her professional and social life, Diana still found herself missing the simple moments with her family. She often called her parents, sharing stories about her new adventures, her new friends, and the exciting changes in her life. They were proud of her, and she could hear it in their voices every time they spoke. One evening, Diana sat on the balcony of her apartment, staring at the night sky. The city below was a sprawling maze of lights, full of dreams and stories waiting to be written. For the first time, she felt truly aligned with herself, free to choose her own direction, to follow her passions and dreams without hesitation. She was no longer the person she had been just a year ago, burdened by the weight of expectations. She had become the person she was always meant to be. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from her mother. "Rebecca Miller, your father and I are coming to visit you in 2 weeks. We can't wait to see the city and spend time with you." Diana smiled to herself, feeling a rush of warmth in her chest. Despite all the changes, her parents were still there for her. They had evolved together, and now they were ready to step into this new chapter with her, not as they once were, but as they had become: stronger, more authentic, and more connected. Diana tapped a quick reply. "Diana Miller, I'm so excited, Mom. It's been too long. Can't wait to show you around." As she sent the message, Diana thought about how much had changed. The healing, the growth, the changes in herself and her family, these were the things that mattered. These were the things that defined her life now. And in that moment, Diana knew that no matter where life took her, she was ready. She was ready to embrace each new chapter with open arms, to continue healing, growing, and living fully. The future wasn't a distant dream. It was her present reality, unfolding one step at a time. And that was enough. For now, that was more than enough. Chapter 9. Reconnecting. The weeks leading up to her parents' visit passed in a blur of excitement and anticipation. Diana had not seen her parents in person for several months, and she realized how much she had missed the simple comfort of being around them. Although they spoke regularly, it was different when they were together, sharing the same space. This visit felt like a milestone, a tangible representation of how far they had all come in their healing journey. The day they arrived, Diana couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia mixed with joy. She met her parents at the airport, her heart fluttering with excitement as she spotted them walking toward her. They looked older, more at ease with themselves. There were no pretenses between them anymore, just the raw, unfiltered version of their relationship, one built on mutual respect and understanding. "Diana," her mother exclaimed, pulling her into a tight hug. "We made it. I'm so glad you're here, Mom." "And you too, Dad," Diana said, stepping back to embrace her father, who smiled warmly at her. "I've heard so much about the city," Charles said, his voice filled with awe. "It's even more amazing than I imagined." Diana smiled as she led them to her car. "Wait until you see it at night. The city looks completely different when the lights come on." The next few days were a whirlwind of sightseeing, exploring local attractions, and enjoying each other's company. Diana took them to her favorite restaurants, shared stories of her new life, and showed them all the spots that had become meaningful to her over the past year. It was a beautiful balance of nostalgia and new memories, all wrapped up in the warmth of family. One evening, they sat together on the balcony of Diana's apartment, watching the sunset as the city came to life below them. Diana felt a sense of peace in the air, the kind that only comes when you're surrounded by people you love, who love you in return. "This place is incredible," Rebecca said, sipping her tea as she looked out over the city. "I can see why you love it here." "I do," Diana replied, smiling. "It's become home." Charles leaned back in his chair, gazing at the horizon. "I'm glad you found a place that makes you feel this way. You've always been so determined, Diana. It's inspiring to see you so happy." Diana's heart warmed at his words. "It wasn't easy, Dad, but I've learned that sometimes, in order to move forward, you have to let go of the past. And I think we all needed to do that." Rebecca looked over at Diana, her eyes soft with emotion. "I think we've all been on that journey. You've shown us what it means to truly live, Diana. To live for ourselves, not for anyone else's expectations. I'm proud of you." Diana felt a lump form in her throat. The words her mother had just spoken felt like the culmination of everything they had worked through, years of silence, misunderstandings, and unspoken pain. And now, in this moment, everything had come full circle. The past no longer held the power it once did. They were free. "Thank you, Mom," Diana said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have gotten here without you both." The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with an unspoken understanding between them. It was as if they all knew that this was the moment they had been working toward. Not a perfect moment, but one that was filled with acceptance, love, and a deep, unbreakable bond. The next day, Diana and her parents took a trip to a nearby hiking trail, something Diana had always wanted to do but had never found the time for. They spent the day walking through the woods, breathing in the fresh air, and reconnecting with nature. It was the perfect way to close out their visit, a reminder that life, much like the trail, was a journey, sometimes long and difficult, but always worth it. As they reached the summit, Diana stood at the edge, looking out over the vast expanse of the city below. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the landscape. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over her. It was a moment of stillness, of reflection, and of gratitude. Her parents stood beside her, their presence comforting and solid. "I think we're all in a good place," Charles said, his voice calm. "We've come so far." Diana smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We have, Dad. And we're going to keep going." Rebecca placed a hand on Diana's shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "We're proud of you, sweetheart. You've taught us so much about what it means to live authentically. You've shown us the power of letting go and embracing the unknown." Diana turned to face them, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you both. You've always been my foundation. We've all grown so much, and I think that's the most important thing we can do for ourselves." They stood there for a few more moments, watching the sunset, taking in the beauty of the moment. Diana felt a sense of peace and fulfillment, knowing that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but also knowing that she wasn't alone. She had her family, people who understood her, who loved her, and who were on their own paths of growth and healing. As they made their way back down the trail, Diana realized that this moment, this time together, was more than just a visit. It was a symbol of how far they had come, of how much they had all healed. And though the future was still uncertain, she knew that as long as they continued to support one another, there was nothing they couldn't face. They had learned to embrace the unknown, to let go of the past, and to live fully in the present. And in doing so, They had created a family stronger than ever before, one built on love, acceptance, and the courage to change. Diana looked ahead, ready for whatever came next. The future, like the trail, was unknown, but it was hers to walk. Chapter 10: New Horizons. The days following her parents' visit felt different for Diana. There was an undeniable sense of fulfillment that lingered in the air. The time they spent together had redefined her idea of family, solidifying the fact that love wasn't about perfection. It was about acceptance, growth, and mutual support. As she continued to settle into her new life, Diana couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. Work had been challenging, in the best way. She had stepped into a leadership role within her department, something she had only dreamed of before. The responsibilities were demanding, but Diana was no longer intimidated by them. She had learned that challenges were simply opportunities for growth, and she was ready for them. Her team respected her, not just for her skills, but for the way she led with empathy and understanding. She wasn't trying to be perfect. She was simply being real with them, much like she had learned to be with her family. But there was still something missing, a longing for a deeper connection outside of work, something she hadn't fully explored since her move. Diana had always been focused on building her career, her independence, and her relationship with her parents, but she realized she hadn't given much attention to her own personal life. One Friday evening after a long week, Diana found herself at a local coffee shop, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea and her laptop open. She wasn't working, just enjoying the calm of the evening. As she looked around the room, her eyes landed on a familiar face, someone she had seen a few times around the neighborhood. It was Michael, a colleague from one of the projects she had worked on a few months ago. He was sitting alone at a nearby table, reading a book, seemingly lost in his thoughts. Diana had always found him interesting, quiet, thoughtful, with a calm presence that seemed to draw people in. He wasn't the loud, attention-grabbing type, but there was something magnetic about him. She had never worked closely with him, but they had exchanged pleasantries a few times, and she'd noticed how kind and approachable he was. On a whim, Diana closed her laptop, stood up, and walked over to his table. "Michael," she said softly, surprising him. His eyes lifted from his book, and his face lit up with recognition. "Diana, hey," he replied, his voice warm. "It's nice to see you outside of work." "Yeah, I didn't expect to run into anyone here." She laughed. "I was just taking a break from the week. Do you mind if I sit with you?" "Of course, please." Michael gestured to the empty chair across from him. Diana sat down, feeling a slight flutter in her chest as their conversation began. They started with small talk, catching up on life and work, but soon the conversation deepened. They shared thoughts about the city, their passions, and what they wanted out of life. Diana was surprised by how comfortable she felt talking to him, how easy it was to be open about her thoughts and dreams. "I've been so focused on my work, my family, and all the changes lately," Diana said after a moment, "that I haven't really thought about what I want outside of that. I think I've been avoiding putting myself out there for anything personal. But talking to you, it's like I've been missing something." Michael nodded, a soft smile on his lips. "I think a lot of people get caught up in the same thing, work, family, the day-to-day. But there's so much more to life than that. It's easy to forget to nurture other parts of ourselves." Diana looked at him, noticing the way his eyes sparkled with genuine understanding. "Yeah, I've realized that I've neglected a lot of things that used to matter to me, like friendships. And well, maybe even finding someone I could connect with." Michael chuckled lightly, his voice full of warmth. "I think you're not alone in that. A lot of people forget that balance is key, not just in work, but in life overall. It's easy to focus on one thing, but it's the little things, the personal connections, that make everything else worthwhile." They continued talking for a while longer, exchanging stories and perspectives, before Diana realized how much time had passed. She hadn't felt that kind of connection in a long time, and it left her feeling lighter, more open to the possibilities ahead. Over the following weeks, Diana and Michael began spending more time together. What started as casual conversations during lunch breaks slowly turned into more intentional hangouts outside of work. They explored new parts of the city, went to art exhibits, and even tried cooking together on the weekends. With each moment they shared, Diana felt more at ease, as if she was discovering a new side of herself that had long been dormant. It wasn't just about romantic potential, it was about companionship, the kind of connection that made life richer. Diana realized that she had been so focused on her independence that she hadn't allowed herself to truly open up to someone else. With Michael, it wasn't about needing him to complete her, it was about sharing experiences and finding joy in each other's company. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of her apartment, watching the sunset over the city, Michael turned to her, his gaze soft but sincere. "Diana, I just want to say how much I appreciate your honesty. You've been so open with me about your life, your family, your dreams. It's refreshing to meet someone who isn't afraid to be real, even in a world that often pushes us to put on a mask." Diana smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I think that's one of the most important things I've learned over the past year, being real with myself, with others. It's not always easy, but it's the only way I can truly live." Michael nodded, his smile growing. "I admire that, and I feel lucky to have met someone like you." Diana's heart fluttered. She had never been one to rush into anything, but with Michael, there was no pressure. It felt right. It felt easy. And it made her realize that maybe, just maybe, she was ready to open her heart in a way she hadn't before. As the year came to a close, Diana stood on the edge of another new chapter. She had grown so much in the past year, both personally and professionally. She had healed, rebuilt, and learned how to live for herself. And now she was ready to embrace the future with a heart that was full, open, and ready for whatever came next. Her relationship with Michael had blossomed into something more meaningful than she had ever expected. She no longer saw herself as a solitary person moving through life alone. She was part of something bigger, something that felt genuine and real. Her parents had continued to flourish in their own ways, and their bond was stronger than ever. Diana had made peace with the past, but she had also made room for the present, for the people who mattered, and for the love and connection that was now a natural part of her life. The future was still uncertain, as it always would be, but Diana was no longer afraid of it. She had learned that life wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about taking each step as it came, embracing the unknown, and trusting that, with the right people by her side, she would always find her way. And as she looked ahead to the horizon, Diana knew that the best was yet to come.